Okay, good morning. This is the fire weather briefing for Saturday, September 20th. And just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. By joining and participating in the session, consent is being given to the recording. Please keep cameras off per NOAA Privacy Act statements. My name is Stephen. I'm in Spokane, and then we also have Kirby in Seattle today. So to start off, to look at the satellite imagery from this morning, we can see there's a fairly deep low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska, and that is generating a fairly robust cold front that is sweeping across the eastern Pacific. You can see that here in the upper levels with the tightening isobars here, also the cloud cover out ahead of the front. But before that gets here, which will be mostly into tomorrow, or at least into the evening hours tonight, into Western Washington, we do have some fairly dry air aloft, and I indicated that here in the satellite image, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it'll be this frontal system that's going to be generating some elevated fire weather conditions for eastern Washington and potentially into North Idaho as well. So taking a little bit closer look at our visible satellite image, there is some low clouds with the marine layer fairly shallow though on the west side. You can see that. The other thing that you can see is quite a bit of smoke around from the fires that are burning in the Cascades, and then also into northeast Washington generating some smoke. And that could have some impacts as well, depending on when that smoke is going to clear out. But winds will be increasing today ahead of the front, and that should help to kind of clear out some of the smoke. I also wanted to just mention the current relative humidities, just focusing on those elevations above 3,000 feet. We did have some fairly poor relative humidity recoveries in the Cascades. This isn't showing the minimum, or I should say the maximum relative humidities overnight, but you can see they're quite low at around 8:30 this morning, around lower Sugarloaf with 17%, which is quite dry for how early it is in the day so far today. You can see a lot of these stations here in between the teens, even at 15% down here near the Wildcat. Or no, I'm sorry, that's not the Wildcat. And then even up to 30% for some of these morning relative humidities. And as we get over into northeast Washington, there's even not as bad, but fairly low relative humidities there between the around 40% up to near 60% for those mid slopes and ridge tops. And then for the matrix, we'll start over on the west side, and Kirby, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, generally we're green through the period. I think in the shorter term, we're looking at that potential wetting rain, particularly over the Olympics, and then possibly over the Cascades. And then it does, as we trend back into next week, it does look like we return to drier and warmer conditions. And as we get into Tuesday, it does look like we've got a few spots in the Cascade, especially southern Washington Cascades, where we have some potential for mid-RHs dipping down into the 20s again. So that's that warm and dry, but it does look like it'll be relatively short-lived. Beyond that, it looks like we continue to transition into more normal conditions for this time of year late in the week.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kirby. As we continue eastward into eastern Washington, North Idaho, that cold front that will be sweeping through for tomorrow, kind of coming into tonight's tomorrow, we do have, like I mentioned, some elevated fire weather conditions with that. Moisture won't be coming in here today, and so we will see some increased winds, warm, dry, and breezy, especially across eastern Washington. The winds won't be strong enough to be meeting criteria for critical fire weather conditions, but it will definitely be quite dry. North Idaho won't be as breezy, more locally breezy conditions, but also warm and dry there. As we get into Sunday, that's when over here in eastern Washington, North Idaho, we see our best chance for some showers. We're not expecting a lot of precipitation accumulations with the front, but will be some light accumulations. Feel pretty confident about that. But we also are going to see the potential for some thunderstorms, primarily over northeast Washington and then also into North Idaho. And also it'll be a breezier day as well with the cold front passage. The winds will be noticeably stronger for tomorrow. So relative humidities will be up. We will see some lightning. So nothing really fitting the criteria for critical fire weather conditions, but it'll be another elevated fire weather day for us. And then Monday, just kind of locally breezy up the Okanagan Valley. And then kind of as what Kirby mentioned there on the west side over here too, we'll be getting warm and dry. Temperatures warming up above average. Today, we're actually going to be, I wrote it down here, 10 to 12 degrees above normal. So won't be getting as warm as we get into that Tuesday, Wednesday period, but again, getting above average for temperatures. And then there does look like there's going to be some more breezy periods in here, but there is some spread in the model guidance that I was looking at. So that's why I put some question marks here and left it as green for now. But with the warm and dry up and then seeing some winds increasing again, it might be another kind of period in here around Wednesday where we might see some elevated fire weather conditions because of that. So to highlight the winds and lower relative humidities for today, this is what we're looking at for elevated fire weather conditions. So most of the districts here in eastern Washington, even across the higher elevations of the Cascades, especially where I pointed out that we saw some poor relative humidity recoveries there, up the Okanagan Valley. Winds will be, I didn't put the direction in there, sorry about that, but they're going to primarily be south to southwest. Ahead at the front today, sustained 10 to 15 miles per hour, and could see some gusts in that 20 to 30 mile per hour range. I think the higher gusts will be mostly just kind of in the lee of the Cascades or along the Waterville Plateau. Relative humidities will be in that 15 to 25% range. And these gusts should be fairly spurious, not quite as kind of more late in the day, not like an all day type of event. And the range I put in here between 1900, it's mainly when the relative humidities will be for most of this area here and around 20% or lower, with those winds starting to gradually increase through this period. I already mentioned the poor relative humidity recoveries in the Cascades at the mid slopes and ridge tops. It is going to remain breezy overnight too with that front, but the relative humidities will be recovering quite nicely, which will be a change from what we saw in the Cascades or just in general. And by 2100, you can expect those relative humidities recovering. Also wanted to show a hot, dry, windy index. This is near Chelan, just to give you some context. As we go through the week, you can see the model spread here is pretty in good agreement, at least in the above 75th percentile for this index. And then it goes down over the next few days. And then on Wednesday, there is some potential we could see a similar type of hot, dry, windy sort of event, although temperature's not as warm. But it looks like another kind of dry and winds increasing, but not as much agreement here. So that's why I put some question marks there in the matrix, and kind of have to see how the models kind of come together for that period. Okay, moving along. The only hazards is air quality advisory there for the Bear Gulch in the Olympics. And then moving on to the weather, starting with day one, that would be today. Looking at temperatures, as I mentioned, above normal in the lower to, or in the 70s in general, it looks like, in the lower elevations of the western Washington. And as we go into eastern Washington, North Idaho, we're looking at temperatures in the 80s to near 90 for some places. And then the minimum relative humidities, you can see, will be quite dry in eastern Washington, with minimums in the lower 20s to teens, and then getting into 20s to lower 30s for North Idaho. And then for the winds, mentioned sustained winds and that kind of 10 to 15 miles per hour. You can see kind of a south, maybe south-southwest orientation, more westerly through the gorge there. And then wind gusts and that, like I mentioned, kind of the 20 to 25, maybe some gusts, especially in Kittitas Valley, the gorge getting around 30 miles per hour there. Looking at our chance of wetting rains, this will be just mainly on the west side here. And this would be kind of late in the day, kind of more in the evening hours. And is that correct, Kirby? What time are you expecting the showers to kind of start increasing there?
Yeah, that would be late this evening into early tomorrow morning. So you got that right.
Okay. And then, I also just wanted to really quickly show the max relative range just to show that we will see much better recoveries for tonight, the speed tonight into tomorrow morning. And then moving on to tomorrow, just wanted to show the temperatures that they will be quite a bit cooler with that cold front coming through, a lot more cloud cover and showers. So we'll see much cooler temperatures. And then relative humidities will be much higher, especially on the east side. You can see quite a difference there, but the minimums more into the Okanagan Valley, Methow Valley, we'll still see kind of some lower 30s for the minimums, but for the most part, more into the 40s and even not getting below 50% for a lot of the area. But it will be a breezier day across the eastern Washington and even into North Idaho. And we will see more of a wind shift out of the west with that front coming across. So something to keep in mind, kind of shifting more southwest to a more west orientation to the winds. And the wind gusts more likely to be a bit stronger as well. You can see, especially across the plateau into the northern basin, we can see wind gusts above 30 miles per hour, more on that 30 to 40 across those areas. And then more likely to see the winds kind of mixing down into the valleys across North Idaho as well, where a lot of those places there tend to be a little bit more sheltered from the winds. And then for the chance of wetting rains, so, continuing on the west side early in the day, and then we start to see the rain increasing, or the chances for showers, just to say, increasing across eastern Washington and North Idaho. But if you look at these percentages for these locations, nothing is really too high. There's definitely some higher or some darker greens across the higher elevations. So the mountains will more likely see the potential for some wetting rains getting more than 1/10 of an inch. But since we're going to be so dry today, with that front moving in, that a lot of that moisture will actually be going into just moistening up the lower levels of the atmosphere before we start seeing precipitation reaching the ground. So unfortunately, a lot of that moisture will probably just be going into moistening up the lower levels instead of actually seeing some good accumulations for rainfall. But there will be some light rain along the front, and then also a potential for some thunderstorms, more isolated in the Cascades, and then a better potential where we could see more in the way of isolated scattered thunderstorms in Northeast Washington and going into North Idaho, where it would be a better potential for some lightning across those areas. And then I also wanted to touch on Wednesday, just that the temperatures will be rebounding. You can see fairly similar, maybe not quite as warm as what we are expecting today. Definitely kind of more in the low 70s there on the west side and kind of more in the mid 80s for our highs, at least what they're looking at right now. In eastern Washington, also getting drier again, fairly similar RHs to today, maybe not quite as dry. And then the winds, more uncertainty as far as how much wind we'll see, but they do look like they will be increasing again. There's another weather system that will be approaching, increasing those southerly winds across the area here on the east side. Okay, moving along for the precipitation amounts that we're looking at, I just wanted to show the 1 through through 3-day totals. So that include today through Monday, but most of this occurring tonight and tomorrow. So it does look like there could be some spots here, mostly in the mountains, west side of the Olympics, that would be getting above a ½ inch, maybe up to around an inch. But down in the valleys, less likely to see wetting rains. Am I saying that correctly there, Kirby?
That's right.
Okay. And then, like I mentioned, much drier, so it'll be harder to see accumulations over eastern Washington, North Idaho, where in general across the basin, you may only see a few hundredths. As we get into the mountain areas, a better chance of seeing around a 1/10 of an inch. Some of these thunderstorms that occur across northeast Washington, North Idaho, better chance for seeing, some heavier rain underneath the cores of those storms. So that would probably be the better chance of seeing more in the way of near a 1/4 of an inch, but would probably be located with where the storms occur. Okay, moving on to our trends. I probably should have had yours selected here, Kirby, but okay. Starting with, I'm going to pronounce this correctly, hopefully, Ohana Bakash.
That's right.
Go ahead. Okay.
I think the big thing to highlight here is generally in terms of RH, the good recoveries and nominal min RHs during the day, dipping down probably close into the 20s, maybe as early as Monday afternoon, but definitely by Tuesday afternoon. We'll see some, especially south of the Cascades, which is where Ohana Bakash is, and then improving later in the week. So the one dry day would be the one I'm really kind of keeping an eye on still would be Tuesday. That's I think all I've got to talk about there.
Okay, sounds good. Shifting further east here, I wanted to look at Dry Creek. Oh, here it is. So this would be kind of close to the lower Sugarloaf, or actually in the lower Sugarloaf fire there. So just want to mention that, we're starting out, this is even overdoing the relative communities right now, but starting out dry. And this is, again, like I said, overdoing it, but it is going to be quite dry there today. Also, the winds sort of steadily increasing today and will be continuing to be breezy through the day. If you do look at the bottom there, though, that the chances for precipitation are increasing, so that would be good. So even though the winds remaining breezy, should see some precipitation there, and then remaining breezy into Sunday. And then we'll be cooler. RH is coming up, but then warming back up again as we go into next week. And then seeing the potential for some winds picking up again around that Wednesday timeframe. Moving over to Kettle Falls, where we do have some active fires there in the area. You can see temperatures do look like to be quite warm today. The valleys in the upper 80s. Could see some south winds there, a little breezy, especially on those exposed ridges, and temperatures cooling as we go into the early next week. But then as we go into Tuesday, warming back up to the low 80s, and Wednesday as well. And then moving over to North Idaho, Bonners Ferry, same sort of trends. As you can see in the winds there, there's more of a peak for tomorrow, where we should see some better mixing there, mixing down some of the stronger winds, and will probably be the breeziest day over the next 7 days there in North Idaho. But also seeing around a 50% chance for precipitation and rainfall. So there will be some cloud cover and rain there as well. So not as much of a concern for fire weather conditions because of the added moisture. And then warming up as we go into the middle of next week as well. Okay, just wanted to also look at the cluster analysis really quick. And this is for early next week. Let's go ahead to around Wednesday. Actually, let's go ahead and do this. So this will be around Thursday, so early next week, just to show that there is some differences in the ensembles where around 30% is showing a fairly flat kind of ridging pattern, and then about 25% showing at least the ridge axis maybe more off to the east, and maybe getting a bit more of a wave disturbance coming through that could give us some more wind. So main thing I wanted to come across here is that, if we do get a little bit more of a stronger wave that comes through, that means temperatures probably won't be as warm, but we will be breezier, but still dry. I wouldn't expect much precipitation. And if we don't get much dynamics here or a wave coming through, then it'll probably be a bit warmer and relative humidity is drier. And then just to finish off with our 8 to 14 day outlook here from the Climate Prediction Center. So this will take us through the end of September to early October. We are looking at leaning at temperatures above average, and then also precipitation leaning above normal. And that is all I had to share for our briefing today. Go ahead and stop the recording.